So, we all laughed when the Cleveland Browns signed their 6th quarterback. But it turns out they probably should have signed 7. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, or if you are new here, then please do me a favour and hit that subscribe button. So, Shedeur Sanders is injured. The Cleveland Browns are not allowed to have nice things. Fresh off of his, pretty encouraging performance in his first ever NFL game in the Browns preseason win against the Panthers, he is now injured, unlikely to play in the preseason game against the Eagles. We'll see how long he's obviously out for. It's listed as day-to-day. But, we've all seen this Cleveland Browns team call injuries day-to-day and them last a lot longer. So at this point, it's hard to really get a scope of it. But obviously, the bad news is that Shedeur Sanders is injured. The good news is that I now know what a oblique muscle is. I'll be honest, not a medical student. Heard it thrown around a few times. For some reason, I thought it was your shoulder. No idea why. That kind of made sense when I saw oblique injury and I thought that was a shoulder. Oh, he had a sore shoulder last week. No, this is one of the muscles, I believe, down this side of your torso. And it now makes me think I've definitely pulled that muscle or damaged that muscle, because I get pains in my oblique quite often. But of course, I'm not a professional quarterback and I don't have to throw a football. It's one of those injuries that even Kevin said it himself. If this is a guard, he could go out and play with this injury, but he's a quarterback and it affects throwing the ball. It provides some discomfort while throwing the ball. So that's the injury. That's all we know about it now. As I said, it's kind of hard to scope at the minute if this is going to be anything longer than day-to-day, as they said. We don't really know. He's actually not ruled him out completely out of the preseason game. He said it is unlikely, but the fact he hasn't immediately just ruled him out is obviously good news. They obviously think that this is a genuine day-to-day thing. But I would be surprised if we see him on Saturday against the Eagles. I just don't see it. Obviously, with suffering this injury, he got no reps against the Eagles in the joint practices. So I would be pretty surprised if he does play in this game. I think we're going to get a dose of Dillon Gabriel and Tyler Huntley. But then, that's another quarterback that's been dealing with injuries. I made a joke at the start. The Browns had 6 quarterbacks on the roster. They probably should have had 7 because it all started with Kenny Pickett. He obviously did his hamstring towards the start of camp. That kept him out a week or so. He's still even limited now. Dillon Gabriel tweaks his hamstring. He has to miss a few practices. He has to be limited in practices. And now Shedeur Sanders has an oblique strain. Seems to be a lot of soft tissue stuff. We've had this for quite a few years now. I'm not a medical expert. In the end of the day, this is someone who's, I've pulled my oblique. I've hurt my shoulder. I've done my knee doing the most random things, like stepping off a curb. I once stepped off a curb and had to have 2 weeks off because of a back injury. These things can be pretty random. So whilst, in that breath, I don't want to be like, the training staff and all of the, all the health and all of that stuff that needs to be redone and they need to sack everyone and all of this stuff. I do have to make it known that, these things can be random. But with that being said, the strength and conditioning clearly aren't focusing on these soft tissues, because we seem to get more soft tissue injuries than most teams. We probably don't. As I always say, it's easy to kind of get fixated, tunnel vision on your team, and you kind of think that anything that bad that happens to your team is the only team it happens to. There's probably league-wide fans, maybe not British, but fans on YouTube talking about their team and talking about their strength and conditioning staff and how they need to be sacked because they're dealing with a lot of soft tissue injuries. But it is annoying and something that hopefully stops because we don't want to keep having to miss players because of soft tissue injuries. They're the kind of injuries that linger. They're the kind of injuries that can lead to worse outcomes. So obviously we want to see that, get improved. But who's going to play in this game then? Because, as I said, I expect it to be Dylan Gabriel and Tyler Huntley, but they've not actually announced that Dylan Gabriel will be starting in this game. He's, of course, still dealing with that hamstring injury, has been limited even this week. So if Dylan doesn't play, genuinely, and I say this with genuine all seriousness, do not be surprised if the Cleveland Browns sign a 7th quarterback, because you can't just have Tyler Huntley out there. You might be able to get away with Tyler Huntley out there and Joe Flacco in uniform just in case, but I don't think they want to play Flacco in any of these preseason games. If he does at all, he'll get 1 or 2 series in the last game. So they might have to sign someone if Dylan can't play this game, which is going to be fucking hilarious. All of the memes are going to be hilarious. 7 quarterbacks. Wow, that would certainly be a story. But regardless of who plays, I'll do my kind of preview and talk about the Eagles joint practices, which we're getting some pretty exciting news out of. So keep your eyes peeled for that video. I'll do that tomorrow, talk about all of that stuff before I'm away this weekend for a wedding, my 7th wedding in a year. All of my family have decided to some reason get married all within the same year. It is what it is. I'll have the game on my phone. I'll, of course, watch all of the film from it and break the game down afterwards. But I will be doing that preview as well and talking about what to expect from the game. And, of course, what we've seen this week in the joint practices. But today I just obviously wanted to kind of touch over the injuries and just kind of not laugh at it, because I don't want to laugh at any of these injuries. But it is kind of getting to that point now where it's hard not to laugh. Shedeur, as I mentioned, I'll go back to Shedeur. It's an oblique injury. Hopefully it is only a few days, but it's just come at a really bad time. And to be honest, all of these quarterback injuries have been incredibly untimely. Like, it's not just the fact that they've gotten injured in the most untimely fashion. Kenny Pickett, this is someone that I had as our starter this year. I'm not fully ready to jump off the ship. I think it's pretty doubtful now, but this is someone that I highlighted as the Browns starter. So I think the Browns were interested in that. I do think they wanted to see if that's something that he could do. And so obviously the injury that he gets while in a quarterback battle, while essentially battling for that week 1 starter spot with Joe Flacco, he gets injured, loses reps, Flacco gets more reps. You're just going down the pecking order and you're not making it any easier for yourself. Dylan Gabriel, he's also involved in this quarterback battle. Which guy's going to be the number 2? Which guy's going to be wearing uniform on game weeks? All of these things factored in, and just an untimely injury for him. And then, of course, coincided with Shedeur Sanders' good performance in the preseason game. That's just piled on him even more. This is a player that I think it feels like half the fan base doesn't even like. I, for one, disagree with hating on any Cleveland Browns player that's not called Deshaun Watson. If you play for the Cleveland Browns, you've got a fan in me until you give me a reason not to. I'm rooting for Dylan Gabriel as much as I'm rooting for Shedeur Sanders. Do I think that Shedeur Sanders is more talented? Yes. Did I have him graded higher coming out? Yes. If you ask me now, which guy do I still think has the best chance of being an NFL quarterback? Yes, it is still Shedeur Sanders. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to just crap on Dylan Gabriel because he's under 6 foot. I will just say this now. He is 1 centimetre shorter than Baker Mayfield. So if you're going to make the jokes and call him 5'9", then I'm assuming your Twitter is probably filled with jokes saying the same thing about Baker Mayfield. If not really being consistent with it, are we? I do think it's a little bit unfair what he is getting. But, if he can play this week, great opportunity for him. He can show that he can block out the noise. So hopefully Dylan this hamstring injury is past him. It's not lingering, and it's something that he can overcome. But as I said, just untimely injuries for all of these guys. And now Shedeur Sanders, as I said, just coming off of a really good performance in your first ever NFL game in the preseason, making climbs up that depth chart. Everyone freaked out on social media when he got no reps yesterday. I'll be honest, it's the first time that I've ever bitten. I'm usually the very well reserved, trying to be the calm guy in the room. And even me, after the day that I had yesterday, and I got home from work, not in the best of moods, and seeing that, I just initially the first thing I saw was Shedeur Sanders not getting the snaps. I'll admit, even I bit for the first time. We were all proved to be idiots, as anyone is that does this and does this conspiracy theory stuff. You are always going to get proved to be an idiot when you try and do this stuff. I learned that the hard way. Threw my hat in it a little bit, entertained the why are they not giving Shedeur Sanders reps. Within an hour, immediately put back in my place. So, there's no conspiracy. They're not making this injury up. I've seen literally the footage of Shedeur struggling with his oblique. So this is not some made up thing. But it is untimely and annoying, to be honest. Just really annoying. Really wanted Shedeur to kick on off that performance and kind of build from it and go from there. And now this is just basically thrown a wrench in that because he's missed all of the joint practices against, not just an NFL team, the Super Bowl champions. One of the best defensive lines and one of the best offensive lines in football. Really good opportunity for these guys to get some good reps. And Shedeur Sanders has had to miss all of it because of an injury. He's probably, pretty much definitely going to miss the game because of an injury. So does this drop him in the quarterback depth chart? Probably, just out of availability reasons. So it is annoying. Very, very annoying. I'm sure the Shedeur fans are even more annoyed than I am. But, at the end of the day, whether you're a Shedeur fan, Colorado fan, Browns fan, we all want this guy to succeed. That's the common ground we all have. Yes, maybe half of those don't want Dillon Gabriel to succeed either. But even with wanting Dillon Gabriel to succeed, I still want Shedeur Sanders to succeed. At the end of the day, I've said it here before, I don't care who plays quarterback. I just want a damn quarterback, man. I've been watching bad quarterbacks for long enough. I just want a damn quarterback. Whether it's Dillon Gabriel, whether it's Kenny Pickett, whether it's probably more likely Shedeur Sanders, I don't really care. I have a preference, of course. There's a guy that I think, maybe the hype videos get me a little bit more going, Of course, we all have our preferences. But at the end of the day, I just want a damn quarterback, man. And whatever guy can be that quarterback, if they are in this room, great. But finally on the injuries, I do think it's funny. There is always a funny side to pull out of anything. Okay, 99% of stuff, shall we say. There's always a funny side to pull out of most things, shall we say. And even with all of these injuries to the Browns quarterback room, that funny thing is the fact that the 40-year-old quarterback is the only one that's not been injured. Joe Flacco is 40 years old. And this is not like he's, because they've kind of had him on ice and he's not got that many reps. He's had a lot of reps. He's probably had arguably as many reps as anyone else. And he's the only one that is not being injured other than Tyler Huntley, but let's not really count that. So credit to Joe. Availability is the best ability. He might win this quarterback battle purely based on that. And, as I said, availability is the best ability. There's nothing to criticise that about. If that's how you win the quarterback battle, you won it fair and squarely because, as I said, availability is the best ability. But overall, let's hope that none of these injuries are serious. Let's hope that, the Browns and us can get a full scope of all four of these guys, in these last few weeks before the season starts. I expect the starter to probably be announced by next week in terms of the week one starter. I expect it to be Joe Flacco, but we will, of course, talk about that as and when. But for now, let's get healthy, guys. Let's get healthy, Shedeur. I want to see you, see all of these guys playing. It is annoying. I want to see my boy ball out against the Eagles. They don't really play their starters. There might be the odd starter on defense, but They don't really play their starters anyway, but it still would have been cool to see him against the Super Bowl champs. But if we don't, which we probably won't, it'll also be cool to see Dylan as well, which we might not. So let's just not, set that in stone yet. We might have to deal with watching Tyler Huntley and, I don't know, like Jeff Driscoll playing in this game. Someone that they're going to have to sign. And obviously I'm at a wedding for this game. So if it is Tyler Huntley and a Jeff Driscoll, maybe I haven't got my eyes on it as much as I would have if it was a Shedeur Sanders or a Dylan Gabriel. But in the end of the day, if it's not Shedeur, I want it to be Dylan. I want to get as best evaluation as we can get on these guys before we start making roster decisions, whether that's the Browns front office themselves or us as fans as well. Of course, we're not the ones making the decisions, but we can react to it, based off that. But as I said, I'm, of course, going to be talking about the Browns preseason game against the Eagles, talk about all of the joint practices this past week. We've had some pretty exciting reports coming out of especially today's joint practice, the most recent joint practice. I would have done that video today, but I've had a terrible week. I'm behind. This video had to come first. Wanted to do this one first, but the other one will be out tomorrow. And after this weekend, full storm ahead. I've got no more weddings, no more nonsense stuff taking up my valuable Cleveland Browns time. It will be full go ahead. Back to regular programming on this show after this weekend. But I do apologise for the slight lack of videos this week and for them being a little bit late. But unfortunately, as I always say, for some reason, no one has decided to start paying me for this yet. I don't know why. Maybe one day. But as always, guys, that will do it for me today. Thank you so much for watching. If you do enjoy my content, then please drop this video a like. Hit the subscribe button. You all know how the algorithm gods work. It really helps out. You can also check the links in the description to see where you can follow me, get in touch with me on social media. All of my pages and all of that stuff's there. I'm trying to build a community of Cleveland Browns fans. And as I always say, even if I only get to talk to one fan a day, I'm happy because I'm talking Browns football with the best fan base in the world. Thanks again for watching, guys. Enjoy the rest of the week. Enjoy the weekends. But most importantly, go Browns.